Governor of Tennessee Bill Lee is still proposing a ton of money toward the future of the Nashville Fairgrounds, and Junior Motorsports is still interested in potentially joining the Cup Series in the next couple of years. What's going, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to the video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jeremy Clements' 2020 First Civic Funding Gold Chrome scheme that we're going to see this weekend here at Martinsville. I really love this paint scheme. Also, really awesome that Out of the Group is joining on the sponsor. I think that's really awesome, really great, and I'm really looking forward to see this paint scheme out on the racetrack this weekend here at Martinsville. And the other paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis' 2022 Lime Tree marketing scheme that we are going to see at Texas Motor Speedway in June. This paint scheme is really awesome. In my opinion, really cool to see Lime Tree marketing is coming on the work of Ryan Ellis. I think it's really awesome to see that, and I'm very happy to see that Ryan Ellis is going to be having Lime Tree marketing sponsoring at Texas Motor Speedway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Erik Jones. As Erik Jones announced, I believe on Friday, that he announced is a foundation fundraiser called 3 Reasons to Race, which is going to take place on May 19th at Birch Run, Michigan, which I believe is his hometown in Michigan. He's from that area, so it'll basically be in Birch Run, Michigan. Really cool to see these drivers have fundraisers, and it's really awesome to see that for sure, and happy to see that Erik Jones has got a fundraiser going. I think it's really awesome, really cool, and very happy to see that Erik Jones has got a fundraiser. I think it's really awesome, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Dasher Cash drivers that are eligible for Martinsville. So, the 4 drivers that are eligible for the Dasher Cash and Xfinity this weekend in Martinsville are Sam Mayer, who won a Dasher Cash this past week, AJ Allmendinger, who finished in 4th, Riley Hurts, who finished 5th, and Ty Gibbs, who won the race at Richmond. We'll get into Ty Gibbs later in this episode. But these are the 4 drivers that are going for the Dash for Cash. All 4 of these guys, I think, realistically have a chance to win the Dasher Cash. I still think Ty Gibbs has got a really good shot at winning it, but I think Ty Gibbs has got a really awesome opportunity. But these 4 guys are going to be going for the Dasher Cash. I think all 4 have a really good shot, and those are the 4 drivers that will be going for the Dasher Cash here this weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Candlebox. As Candlebox is going to be performing a pre-race concert for the NASCAR Xfinity Series race in July. For a lot of you who do not know Candlebox was a very popular band back in the 90s with songs like For Like You and also the song Far Behind. They had a couple major songs in the 1990s. They've had singles over the last couple years but haven't been really popular. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not the most relevant band, but I do like the NASCAR's changing up who they're bringing into the track. So that's really cool, but at the same token, at the same time, I want to see someone a little more relevant than Candlebox. But I do think it's awesome overall to see if they are trying to change up who they're bringing to the track. I think that's a cool thing in my opinion, and really awesome to see that for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Bass Pro Shops. As this past Thursday, Bass Pro Shops had basically a ton of people who are in the Bass Pro Shops family. This included Johnny Morris, who I believe is the owner of Bass Pro Shops, Dale Jr., Kelly Earnhardt, Noah Gragson, Joe Gibbs, Martin Truex Jr., Austin Dillon, and Rich Schultz were in the Springfield, Missouri for the World Fishing Fair for the 50th anniversary. I think it's really cool to see. Basically, they had a ton of people from different backgrounds who basically are sponsored by Bass Pro Shops. All the drivers and people who associate Bass Pro Shops in NASCAR were involved in that World Fishing Fair. A lot of people were at that. So I think that's really awesome. You were able to get a ton of people out to that event. I think it's really awesome, really cool, and very happy to see that for sure, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about Justin Bonsignore. Now, the Whelen Modified Tour race took place this past weekend at Richmond. I believe this was the first or second race of the Whelen Modified Tour this weekend, and he was able to pick up the victory in the Whelen Modified Tour race at Richmond. He was able to pass Tommy Catalano for the win with around 10 or 15 laps to go into the race. He actually led quite a bit, but also a couple other drivers. I think Eric Goodell led some laps in the race, and a couple other guys led the race, including Ryan Newman, who we're going to get into later in this episode. I wasn't really able to watch the race. From what I heard, I think a lot of people really enjoy the Whelen Modified Tour race. So I think it's really cool to see that Justin won. Justin's a really good Whelen Modified Tour driver, and I think he did a really good job at Ernest. So huge congratulations to him on picking up the victory. Very cool to see that for sure, and I'm very happy to see that he was able to pick up the victory. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Kyle Busch. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race this past weekend at Richmond, history was made, as Kyle Busch had the fastest four-tire pit stop in NASCAR history with a 9.19 second pit stop in the race. That, like I said, is the fastest four-tire stop. Now, there were a couple of guys that got 9.3 and 9.4 second stops like Denny Hamlin did. And they also tried the new choreography this weekend, but this was the fastest four-tire pit stop in NASCAR Cup Series history. I think that's really, really awesome to see that they made history, had the fastest four-tire stop. And we were expecting pit stops to be under 10 seconds, but we're getting to the point now where pit stops almost at this point might get under the 9-second range, and I think that's really awesome. Maybe eventually you get to 8 or 7 seconds. Anyway, I think it's really awesome to see that, and congratulations to Kyle Busch and his team on making history this weekend at Richmond. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Resin combo. Now, I listened to the On the Tear podcast that basically was uploaded by Jeff Gluck and Jordan Bianchi who work at The Athletic. And Jordan Bianchi mentions that there is talk that resin compound might be applied to Richmond Raceway for the future. And there's talk it may be already applied for August. Now, if you watch the race at Richmond, one of the biggest reasons a lot of talking is because they're waiting on to see how the next-gen car race. And unfortunately for a lot of people did not enjoy this race. Don't get me wrong, I actually did like this race. It was my favorite race here, but I really, really liked it. However, I think a lot of people don't like the strategy type of race, and I think you're going to see it in the Jeff Gluck poll here tomorrow when that officially gets released. I think that's something that you're going to be watching to see is how that Jeff Gluck poll goes. I think that's going to be a big determination. But like I said, there's a lot of talk that the resin compound from Nashville onto the track. I don't know if that's a really good solution to it. I think the biggest thing they can do is add sealer to the track. But again, I think the EPA basically banned sealer from being out of the track. I think that's one thing they could do, but unfortunately, I think it was banned from the track, which is really, really unfortunate. So I don't know exactly what they can do, but it looks like resin compound might be out of here in the near future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. As Kyle Busch was speaking to the media before the NASCAR Cup Series race this past weekend, and Kyle Busch says that he agrees with Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. about lack of practice time does not really make Toyota have a chance to make a ton of changes. Now, this past weekend, of course, Toyota won, so it really didn't matter. But you look at Toyota, but besides this weekend at Richmond, Toyota really throughout this year has absolutely struggled. And I think a lot of they were able, of course, to get their adjustments made right and were able to win with Denny Hamlin. But it didn't look like they were going to win at the end because it looked like William Byron was going to win. But I think Kyle Busch is on point. You look at the other manufacturers out this year, and they've seemed to be a lot faster. And I think the lack of practice time is a big issue. And I've been saying this for a long time. I think that there is not enough practice for these teams out there. I think that there should be one session, one long practice session, one happy hour session. I think that's exactly what they need to do. But unfortunately, NASCAR is probably not going to do that. It is what it is, though, but I think that long term, there needs to be more practice. But it is what it is, and NASCAR can make whatever decision. It's their decision if they want to add more practice time or not. But it is what it is on that front. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jack Harvey. As Jack Harvey revealed, I believe, on Thursday afternoon that he has been medically cleared to race at the Long Beach Grand Prix. Now, for those who watch IndyCar, Jack Harvey was injured in a practice wreck for the Texas race, and he thought he was going to be able to race in Texas Motor Speedway, but unfortunately, he basically was not cleared to race, and Santino Ferrucci substituted for him. I saw the wreck. It was pretty nasty. It was a really, really bad accident. So, overall, really, really unfortunate what happened in that wreck, but it's really good to see that Jack Harvey's been medically cleared to come back to the track. I think Jack Harvey is going to have a pretty good year. I think he's had an okay start to the year. Well, he had a good race at the St. PGP, but he didn't have a great race. But good to see that he is going to be back in Long Beach. I think it's really awesome to see. And again, very happy overall to see that he's back and he's eligible to race in the Long Beach Grand Prix. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Peyton Sellers. As it was announced by the SRX that Peyton Sellers is going to be racing at the SRX race at South Boston Speedway on June 25th. Peyton Sellers, for those who don't know, has won late model championships, been racing late models for many, many years, has also made NASCAR starts as well, and has quite a bit of talent. Like I said, he's come from the late model scene. He's been racing late models for many, many years, and I think he's a great driver to bring in to the series, and I think he will absolutely be a contender in the SRX. This is one thing I've generally loved about the SRX season is the diversity in culture and different group of people that they brought into the series, including a driver like Peyton Sellers. So Overall, really happy to see Peyton Sellers in. Like I said, I think he's going to have a really good shot of winning the race at South Boston. They're doing that national contest, and we're going to see who gets in from that. But I think it's really awesome to see that Peyton Sellers is getting an opportunity to race, and very happy to see that Peyton Sellers will be racing in the S-Strikes. I think he's a great talent, a great driver, and I think he'll be a very major contender here in that race. I think he'll do really, really awesome. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Blake Lothian. As Blake Lothian is going to be making his Truck Series debut this weekend at Martinsville, driving to 43 for the Ram Brothers Racing organization. For a lot of you who do not know who Blake Lothian is, Blake Lothian was part of NASCAR's Next Drive the Diversity program, and he also has won a late model race, Hickory, only in his fourth start. Last year, I believe, scored six top fives. I think most of them in the top 10s of his career, and also picked up a win at Hickory. Blake Lothian has a ton of talent, but this truck is not very, very fast. But I think that Blake Lothian is a driver who could be very, very capable of having a good run. But again, the 43 truck has generally not been really, really fast in the past. But driver talent is going to matter a lot, especially for a guy that has a lot of short track experience. I think that could really, really come into play. So overall, the goal for Blake Lothian is have as good of a run as he can. I think if a top 35 would be really, really good in the debut. I know that's not the most impressive, but it is his first race in the Truck Series, and it shouldn't be really high expectations for him. But I think a top 30 run would be really, really awesome for him. So I hope he does get that opportunity and a good run, and good luck to him here at Martinsville this weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Chad Finchum. As Chad Finchum is going to be driving the 13th for NBA Motorsports, I believe, at Martinsville this weekend. I believe that they're going to be entering the 13th car for NBA Motorsports once again this weekend at Martinsville. Chad Finchum attempted to make his debut at Atlanta Motor Speedway, but unfortunately, the fact that there was no qualifying eligible to run, they were not eligible to race, and they'll be attempting to make his first start of the 2022 season. Chad Finchum is a pretty talented driver who I think is better than the cars are capable. I think the car is not as capable as he is, so I think it's really good to see that he's getting another opportunity at MBM. I know they're looking to have quite a few starts with the MBM Motorsports camp this season, so overall, really, really exciting for sure. I think ultimately they go for Chad Finchum is to try to at least make the race for sure, because they don't have a lot of owners' points to back him on a 13 car. And I'm happy to see that Chad Finchum is getting another opportunity to race with NBM Motorsports here. And I think he's going to make a few more starts with the team, and some other guys are getting involved in that 13 car. But I think it's really awesome to see that the NBM Motorsports camp is once again entering, I believe, this weekend at Martinsville. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Keith McGee. As it was announced on Thursday that Keith McGee is going to drive the 43 for Ram Brothers Racing next weekend at Bristol Dirt. Keith McGee has made quite a few starts for the Ram Brothers organization in the past, and this, I believe, will be his first start into the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series in that number 43 truck. I'm not sure how many races Keith McGee will be racing this year. Again, they may be racing the 33 truck at some point, but I think it's really cool. Keith McGee's story is really, really interesting over the years. He's not one of the best drivers out there, but I think he is getting a really good and a great opportunity here to race with some of the big boys in the dirt race. Now, of course, I think he'll have to qualify and pending on owners' points, which I think it shouldn't be an issue for him. But again, heat races are going to be things, so he'll have to qualify from that. And of course, there's last chance qualifiers for the event as well. So overall, I think he's got a really good shot at making the field, and I think he could be a contender for a decent run at the track. Well, we see what happens, but maybe he'll do a good run. Who really knows it? But it's cool to see that he's getting another opportunity. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Alexander Rossi. As Alexander Rossi was speaking about the future of Formula One, and he says that F1 is competition for IndyCar and is something that we need to be aware of and concerned about to a certain degree. Now, we don't only have competition with NASCAR, we got to have competition with Formula One as well. Now, we're going to talk about Formula One with NASCAR here in regards to the driver development program, but Alexander Rossi is talking about the driver development. Really what the situation is a lot of drivers in the development pipeline right now, they're very interested in going over to Formula One. The issue for these young American drivers who are interested in Formula One, because F1 has really grown in the United States, is basically this having impact in the IndyCar world, and unfortunately a lot of those guys are not going to get an opportunity in Formula One. But Formula One is really spiking a ton of interest from Americans, and I think it's just showing there's a lot of competition in the open world market right now. A lot of drivers want to go over there. One of the biggest problems, like I mentioned, is Formula One is not expanding their teams right now. There's a lot of talk that they're not even going to expand. So overall, in my opinion, Alexander Rossi is pretty much on point right here. They do need to eventually get it figured out in regards to that situation. I really hope they do, and hopefully, and the thing is, with IndyCar, they do not do good promotion. That's the biggest thing IndyCar needs to work on long term. But I think Alexander Rossi is pretty much on point with this point, and I think he's really on point here. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Alexander Rossi and James Hinchcliffe. Now, Alexander Rossi and James Hinchcliffe are basically debating about the situation here on the last lap with Ross Chastain and AJ Allmendinger from the situation. And both drivers had different points of view. Alexander Rossi basically had a different point of view than James Hinchcliffe and says that it was awesome what happened on the last lap between AJ Allmendinger and Ross Chastain for the victory. For those who did not watch that race, we saw both have a great battle. AJ gave a bump to Ross Chastain, and then Ross Chastain then basically basically pumped him out of the way and pushed him into Bowman, basically was able to go to victory. Basically, Ross Chastain was able to win. James Hinchcliffe, though, completely disagreed with Alexander Rossi and says that AJ had the better car and basically called it a BS move that Ross Chastain made. Let me explain this to James Hinchcliffe. Apparently, James says he is friends with AJ Allmendinger. I do not agree with James Hinchcliffe that AJ had the faster car. If AJ clearly had the faster car than Ross Chastain, then why couldn't he pass him? If AJ really had a better car than Ross, then why couldn't he pass him? I think Ross clearly had a better car, and AJ was only going to win that race if he moved him. So really, no, in my opinion, I disagree wholeheartedly with James Hinchcliffe. I like James Hinchcliffe a lot, but I do not agree with this take from James Hinchcliffe. Don't get me wrong, I understand he's biased to being good friends, but at the same token, at the same time, to me, I think that James Hinchcliffe is in the wrong situation. I think Alexander Rossi is more on the right, and I think it's the last lap of the race, and you do what you got to do to win these races. So, in my opinion, I think James Hinchcliffe is more in the wrong. I like James Hinchcliffe a lot. He's done great as a commentator, but I do disagree with the fact that situation. So, overall, in my opinion, I do agree more with Alexander Rossi than James Hinchcliffe. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Denny Hamlin. As Denny Hamlin was speaking to the media before the race at Richmond and basically says that his crew chief told them, which is Chris Gabehart, by the way, told them to not tear the splitter up because they wouldn't have one for Martinsville. I think this is really, really important because this tells me that there's still a massive parts shortage in the Cup Series. It does seem like it's as more frequent and as bad as it's been. It seems like more drivers have been hush-hush about the parts shortage and the issues with that. But it seems like the parts shortage is still a major, major issue with these drivers, and it's something these drivers are still focused on and really, really worried about. And I think that's one thing, like I said, we're going to be watching over these next couple of weeks and few weeks, is that parts shortage is still going to be a thing throughout this year. Like I said, it does seem like it's more of a much more major common issue than it used to be, but the parts shortage thing needs to overall get fixed long term. And the fact that Denny Hamlin says, and the team is basically saying that they don't have a back. Well, they may have a backup from a team, but the fact that because the splitter is important, the fact that they're short on splitters, it's a little concerning still. I know that a lot of people disagree, but I think it's a little concerning the fact that they're still having major, major part shortages and issues in regards to that. I hope that's something that does get addressed and fixed long term from NASCAR, and I think it will get fixed long term, the supply chain and the part shortage, but it still is kind of a major issue here in the Cup Series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Brad Keselowski. Now, Brad Keselowski was responding to a tweet from the front stretch, and he basically talked about his struggles in the time he started at Penske. In 2009, Brad Keselowski said he had one win in 4 top 10s for Hendrick Motorsports. He went to Penske, he had a car that sat 32nd in the points. He said it took 12 months to get the first top 10, 18 months to get the first win, and 36 months to get the first championship in that car. And he says that he's already ahead of schedule. Now, don't get me wrong, Brad Keselowski really has not had a great season, but I do have to agree in some ways with Keselowski here that basically the fact that he's already had a schedule, I think he's in a better organization now than he was when he joined Team Penske back in 2010. Because again, he did not have a great year with that 12 team, but he did improve that 12 team in performance considering in 2009. They absolutely struggled. That being said, though, I do agree with Brad Keselowski, and I do feel like he is kind of on point here in that front. So it's good to see that for sure overall, that he feels like he's had a situation. I do agree with him in some ways that I think they are a little bit ahead than where they were not too long ago. So that's great overall to see for sure. And it's good to see that Brad Keselowski and the team feel like they're ahead. I think maybe we're going to find out about their appeals. Remember, their appeal is coming up this week. So that's one thing we're going to be watching over the weekend. But I do agree Keselowski, I feel like they're a little bit more ahead of schedule. And I think that long term we'll see RFK do better. I think right now they're overall struggling set the last couple weeks, but I do think that this team could have it. But they're 86 points outside the cutoff line. Again, like I said, the appeal's coming up really, really soon, so we should know about the situation here very, very soon. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stewart Friesen. As it was announced on Sunday that NASCAR is going to do a test at Bristol this week with Stewart Friesen in the old RCR test car. The reason they're testing the old RCR test car at Bristol Dirt is to kind of see how the dirt racing is going to work and see if they need to make adjustments with the car or not. It's unclear if it's going to be tomorrow or Wednesday if the test is going to happen, but like I said, there is a test this week at Bristol Dirt. Now, they already have had a dirt test. I think it was at Wimmerville in South Carolina they had a test, so I think it's just important because, again, they probably have changed things in regards in this car. It's probably different than the initial one they tested in South Carolina, make sure they have adjustments and stuff ready to go, and some of the changes as well. There's some things that are required on the car for Bristol Dirt that are not acquired on other cars. So, overall, for sure, again, there's going to be no splitter for that, but overall, for sure, I think it's really, really good to see that they're working on that. I think it's really, really important to do work on that for the long-term process. So, good to see that for sure, and I'm glad to see that they continue to work on that. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Volkswagen in Formula 1. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern on Thursday afternoon that Volkswagen F1 is expected to give the green lights Audi and Porsche to join Formula 1. Audi will offer around $556.3 million to McLaren, while Porsche intends to work with Red Bull, and this is expected to basically be given the go-ahead at some point this week. They're expected to give the go-ahead. Now, of course, we've talked about Audi. I think we've talked about this in the past that Audi's been trying to get into Formula 1 here for the last couple of years. They were talking about as early as 2021 that they were trying to get into Formula 1, and they've been really, really interested in that getting into there. What I find interesting is Audi is trying to get involved with McLaren. Now, I think McLaren is still going to want to have their own fair shake. I just think that they're going to want to have the majority say, and Audi's going to try to have a minor ownership stake there. I think McLaren still wants to be their own brand. But talking about Porsche here with Red Bull, I think it's very interesting. Now, of course, right now they only can join up with other organizations because right now at the moment they can't really expand because they don't want to expand the number of organizations and teams. But it is really cool to see that Volkswagen is about to give the green light to choose because again, basically Volkswagen was not a big fan of the whole of F1 and stuff and going into other motorsports, but it's been cool to see that they're now letting Audi get back into LMDH and now they're trying to get into other programs currently at the moment. And I think it's very awesome if Volkswagen continues to be interested in other motorsports as well. And again, I think it's going to be pretty soon. I think it's really awesome that they're getting interested. Now, of course, it could be different organizations they work with long term, but I think it is very awesome overall to see the fact that they're working to work on their organizations long term. Pretty awesome to see, to be honest with you. I think that's really, really awesome. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kevin Harvick and Ross Chastain. Now, Kevin Harvick had some really good comments in regards to Ross Chastain this past weekend. And he basically said, and was speaking to the media, he says, having some of that personality and that I don't give a shit attitude about what happens, and if you don't like that, sorry. Having that edge is something that will make him more popular because on the way that he races. Kevin Harvick is giving praise to Ross Chastain right here, and I think it's very funny considering Kevin Harvick literally just about 4 years ago was not a big fan of Ross Chastain. Remember back at Darlington in 2018, both of them had a run-in late in the race, and Kevin Harvick was not very, very happy with Ross Chastain near the end of the race getting taken out, but Kevin Harvick really, in my opinion, was more at fault than Ross Chastain, and Ross Chastain was really retaliating. But I do agree here with Kevin Harvick. The way that Ross Chastain races might make him a little bit unpopular, but I think it's also going to make him very, very popular overall as well. And I think Kevin Harvick almost is really on point. But it's really cool to see, especially after the issues they had a few years ago. I do think it's really, really awesome that he's basically giving him a ton of praise here. I think that's something that's, again, I think that's really, really cool to see that he's really, really giving him praise right here and praising, Ross Chastain right here. And again, I do agree with Kevin Harvick right here. And I don't always agree with Kevin Harvick on a lot of things, but I do agree right here, Kevin Harvick, that the way that Ross Chastain is currently racing right now, I think that that is something that fans are really going to enjoy long term. So I think that's really, really, it's, again, the fact that Kevin Harvick is praising Ross Chastain, especially what happened over the last couple of years, I think it's kind of nuts for sure, but I think it's really awesome to see, and overall, very, very happy to see for sure that Kevin Harvick is praising Ross Chastain here. I think it is very, very awesome, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Erik Jones versus Cody Ware. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at Richmond. You saw in the early stages of stage number 3, you saw some contact between Erik Jones and Cody Ware. Now, Cody Ware, to be fair, was multiple laps down. I believe Erik Jones, as I believe, 1 lap down, or was still on the lead lap at the time when the restart happened. And Erik Jones just got into the back of Cody Ware, who was slower in the way. Cody Ware took to social media, and he was not very happy with Erik Jones. He says that turn by the 43, had a decent day cut short, no respect given back to me while I try to give it to everyone. I find it very interesting that Cody Ware is really, really mad at Erik Jones. Now, Erik Jones, don't get me wrong, has been causing a lot of wrecks and has been causing a lot of issues on the track, but at the same time, Erik Jones has been overall a much better driver than Cody Ware. That being said, I do feel like Cody Ware was kind of taken out of contention of this race and was kind of taken out of contention of at least having a better run than he probably could have, as he went a lot more laps than he probably should have. I think he would have finished around 3 or 4 laps down in the race compared to finishing, I think, 7 or 8 down, and unfortunately crashing out of the race as well, which is really, really unfortunate. But I can't blame Cody Ware for being upset. They were having a pretty good run, but it's kind of funny considering the guy literally about a year ago was involved in a situation with his teammate James Davis and was basically wrecking his teammates. So in my opinion, situation, I do understand why he's upset, but I do feel like in that situation, as well, I do feel like that Erik Jones, again, he's a faster car than Cody Ware. Cody Ware's kind of in the way, and he probably should get out of the way, but at the same token, at the same time, I do understand that Erik Jones, why Cody Ware is upset, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch once again. Now, Kyle Busch was penalized late at Richmond for having tape on the grill. Now, for those of you who do not know, tape is not allowed on the grill this year due to basically the cooling and the vents and stuff inside the car. You're not allowed to put tape on the grill. The controversy is they left that tape on there for 200 laps, and they waited a long time to penalize Kyle Busch. In my personal insane opinion, I believe that Kyle Busch definitely deserved a penalty. You're not supposed to have tape on the grill for as long as they have it. But they came on the radio, like I said, and they said they had it on for 200 laps. Now, on their part, they should have removed that tape before they got caught. They should have had that tape removed, but they kept it on as they thought they were going to get away with it. But it was clear in the rule book this year that they were not going to be allowing tape on the grill. That being said, I just do not understand why they waited 200 laps to penalize Kyle Busch for that. They should have penalized him a lot sooner than they did. The fact, like I said, that they waited 200 laps to penalize Kyle Busch for that, I do not entirely agree with that. Again, I understand the penalty. I think the penalty was the right call, but I think the fact they waited 200 laps a little bit absurd. Now, the explanation for Ben Bayshore was they thought the tape was going to come off. I'm like, dude, tape does not come off. Tape sticks. It does not come off. You should have taken the tape off of the grill a lot sooner. Again, I understand why they didn't want to take it off because they probably more downforce stuff, but at the same token and at the same time, they got to be a little more aware and pay attention to what exactly is going on, because I think what they did is they cost themselves probably a top 5 runner, shot a top 5 in the race, and they really hurt themselves in this race. So definitely unfortunate for sure. They cost themselves a good run. It really is their fault, unfortunately. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ryan Blaney versus Ross Chastain. Now, there was another rivalry very similar to Erik Jones and Cody Ware that kind of brewed up this past weekend at Richmond. If you watched NASCAR Cup Series race at Richmond, you saw that Ryan Blaney and Ross Chastain got into it. There was a run-in midway through the race. I think about halfway through the race, we saw Ryan Blaney get pushed off the track by Ross Chastain. And Ryan Blaney was really, really pissed and mad on the radio. And basically, after the race, he says, I was inside of him into 3, and I kind of got loose and washed up half a lane, and we never touched. Then later, he says, I went down to the 1, and he just decided to send me. So the next restart, I sent him. So now we're even, I guess. Ryan Blaney feels like it was done wrong there, but I feel like Ross Chastain also probably feels like he was done wrong as well. That being said, in a situation, this is one thing I really love about Ross Chastain is his no-given attitude. I love the fact he really does not care, and he basically doesn't give a shit. He does exactly what he wants to do. And I have a lot of respect for that when it comes to Ross Chastain. I love the fact that he basically doesn't care and basically will push you around, and the drivers kind of are afraid of him. And that's one thing I love is the fact that drivers are afraid of Ross Chastain and afraid of him, because Ross Chastain really does not care. He's a driver that basically is like, I will either give or basically will get pushed around, or I have to push people around and push back. And he's doing that exactly. And that's one thing that I think Ross Chastain is really going to get respect for, is the fact that he's not a guy that wants to get pushed around and doesn't have a problem pushing you back and pushing you around. That being said, Ryan Blaney got his payback later in the race. I saw where he pushed him off the track. It felt like it was even, so I don't think we'll see any tempers and issues between those two. Ryan Blaney really respected what Ron Chastain did last week. There was an article that came out from Matt Weaver that should definitely go check out talking about that. But overall, in my opinion, it's good to see. Again, I don't know if we'll see any tempers between the two, but I don't really think we're going to see tempers between the two, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the World of Outlaws. As Adam Stern reported, I believe on Friday, that World of Outlaws is working with iRacing, or basically Monster Games, on its first new console game in years, per source, with a fall 2022 release set for Xbox and PlayStation. This is huge. The last really big World of Outlaws game that came out was nearly 20 years ago. Now, there was technically a World of Outlaws game, I think, that came out in 2010. But it's been years, and I mean years, since the last great World of Outlaws game. And there's been talk for a while they've been working on a World of Outlaws game and other motorsports games like BTCC and other motorsports games that have been in the works. But the fact that the World of Outlaws is finally going to get a game is big for multiple reasons. Number one, a lot of bigger YouTubers will probably play, not just some of the motorsports YouTubers, but a lot of bigger YouTubers I think are going to play. And this can grow the community in a big way. Video games are a big way to grow the community, and especially since they have the team of iRacing involved now in this, I think that's going to play a factor. Now, it's not going to exactly play like iRacing is. iRacing has a much different engine and much older systems than the current engines in the current systems that are in the iRacing's game. That being said, though, I think it is very, very awesome and very, very exciting that iRacing is working on a game. I think the fact, like I said, they're working on a game right now is really, really huge for the team. So overall, very, very exciting news for sure. And like I said, I'm very pumped up and very happy to see that iRacing is going to have a video game out. I think, again, it's very important for them to have a video game out. And again, game like series like World of Outlaws having a game in years are very, very important. So good to see that they're working on a game here. Of course, IndyCar's got a game coming really, really soon. That's exciting news for sure. And like I said, I'm very, very excited to see that World of Outlaws is getting a game out. And I think, again, it's very important because video games, I think, are very, very important. And really excited to see for sure that they've got a video game that they are working on. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Buddy Kofoid. As it was announced on Thursday that Buddy Kofoid is going to drive the 51 for Kyle Busch Motorsports next week at Bristol Dirt. Yes, that's right. Buddy Kofoid is officially making his Truck Series debut in the 51 for Kyle Busch Motorsports. I can tell you this about this kid. This guy is really, really good. He's a very talented driver. If you watched the Chili Bowl, he was very, very fast there and has been a driver in the Toyota Racing Development Program for many, many years. And the guy knows how to get it done. He's been making some late model starts here and has been pretty good in late models as well. I think he's a very talented young driver who's had aspirations to race in NASCAR for many, many years, and especially on a dirt race, and he's going to get that opportunity to do that. And I think it's really no surprise that he's making his debut. He's been wanting to make racing starts, and like I said, I think Buddy Kofoid, in all seriousness and all honesty, I think he actually can win this race. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but there is going to be more practice this time around, and I think if they can get that high line working like they've been trying to do over the last couple weeks, I think the dirt ringers are really going to come into play, and they're going to be very, very fast. So I'm very pumped up and excited to see that Buddy Kofoid is getting an opportunity, and I've been really excited to see this. I'm really excited to see that he's getting an opportunity for sure to race in this series. I think he's a very good and very talented driver, and I'm very excited to see that Buddy Kofoid is getting an opportunity to race in NASCAR, and really excited to see that he's making his official NASCAR debut at Bristol in the Truck Series. He'll easily be able to qualify, and I think it'll be a factor in the race. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Chicagoland Speedway. As Chicagoland Speedway, and we talked about this last week, we thought Chicagoland Speedway was off the market. Well, it doesn't look like that it is off the market. Now, I posted this on March 31st, day before April Fool's, so for a lot of people say, oh, this is an April Fool's joke. It clearly is not. This is a real report. They say that they're still looking to potentially get back into the racing world, and it's saying that there is a possibility of racing taking place there in the Chicago area and even on the drag strip in 2023. Chicagoland Speedway has not had a race in NASCAR or motorsports really since 2019. The big reason they have really any racing in 2020 is because of the pandemic, and NASCAR has not raced there since 2019. The last time they raced there, of course, was when Alex Bowman picked up the victory in 2019. Chicagoland Speedway is a track in the Midwest, and I know that there's a lot of talk right now about the racing in the street course right now in Chicago, but there's been a lot of talk also politics are really not coming into play, and there's a lot of issues around their politics right now, but I still think there's a really good possibility that Chicagoland Speedway is still going to get it. We're still going to see that Chicago street course race. But it is very possible Chicagoland Speedway could host a date. Chicagoland is about an hour away from the track in Joliet, which is a city that's overall growing, and they're working on housing and marketing development in that area, and I think it's very possible. Now, I think it's still out of the realm of possibility as of now that there is going to be Cup Series race in the near future, but I do believe that there is a chance that it still could happen, that we could see a race in Chicagoland here in the next couple years. I think it's a track that absolutely deserves an opportunity to have a Cup race once again. I do hope that we do get to see a Cup race in the long-term future for Chicagoland Speedway. I think it's a great track overall. You put on great racing, especially with the intermediate racing with the next-gen car. I think it would be a great track to host racing. So I do hope it gets an opportunity to race long-term, and I hope Chicagoland Speedway does get an opportunity to come back to the Cup Series schedule in the long-term future. I hope it happens, and I think it could happen long-term if a lot of people push for it. There's a lot of push for it, and I hope it does happen long-term. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Ryan Newman. As Ryan Newman was interviewed by Bob Pockers on pit road for the Whelen Modified Tour that took place on Friday evening, and he says that he is enjoying life and says he has got calls but is waiting for the right opportunity and the right time to come back to NASCAR, and he basically had the right opportunity to basically race with Hermie Sadler and their organization. Ryan Newman, of course, it made his first Whelen Modified Tour start, really his first NASCAR-sanctioned start of the 2022 season. This is his first start in racing since the Chili Bowl in January, and Ryan Newman says he's been enjoying life. Now, like I said, Ryan Newman says he's had the right call, really wants to get the right call and right opportunity. Now, Ryan Newman, one thing I'll talk about Ryan Newman for a second is Ryan Newman actually is eligible to race in the All-Star race. Now, of course, usually I've heard this too, that basically a driver in their last year is basically eligible. So it's not like Ryan Newman is 100% would not be committed to racing in the Chili Bowl. That being said, though, I do believe that Ryan Newman, it'd be really awesome to see him come back. It's good to see that Ryan Newman is enjoying life. Do not get me wrong. I think it's really awesome Ryan Newman is enjoying life right now. But I think a lot of people do miss Ryan Newman. I feel like Ryan Newman still wanted to race in NASCAR. He wants to be in a car that's very competitive for victories. Now, there, of course, are races he can enter, and I wouldn't be entirely shocked if Ryan Newman somehow comes out of retirement and races like in the Truck Series and race in that series respectively. But I think it's going to be a tough order for Ryan Newman to get into that series right now. That being said, though, I think a lot of people, including myself, do miss Ryan Newman. I think a lot of us do want to see Ryan Newman back in the series respectively. And I do really hope Ryan Newman gets an opportunity to come back at some point and at least do a one-up. I think Ryan Newman is a very great and awesome driver. And again, I think a lot of people, including myself, do miss Ryan Newman, and I hope he does at some point get an opportunity to come back to NASCAR. I think it's going to be very tough for him, but I do hope that Ryan Newman does at one point get an opportunity to come back to NASCAR in the foreseeable future. We all you miss you, Ryan. It's good to see that you're enjoying life, though, to be honest. Now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about John Hunter Nemechek and Ty Gibbs. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, you saw the really good battle at the end of the Richmond race between John Hunter and Ty Gibbs, who are teammates at Joe Gibbs Racing this past weekend. The battle for the win heated up around 5 laps to go, and John Hunter Nemechek got around Ty Gibbs for the lead, and looked like he was going to clear for the win, and he actually got around him officially around 2 laps to go, and on the white flag, they battled really, really hard for the win. Going into turn number 3, Ty Gibbs sends it into the corner, pushes John Hunter up the track, doesn't put him into the wall, but basically misses the corner a little bit, pushes him up the track, and Ty Gibbs goes on to win the race and clear himself to win his 3rd race of the 2022 NASCAR Xfinity Series season. After the race, John Hunter Nemechek showed his displeasure, basically kind of pushed him up the track a little bit, and was not very happy after the race. Ty Gibbs, during his post-race interview, media interviews, and all throughout the race, he says that he knows he has one coming back to him against John Hunter Nemechek, and he basically said I was going to have to move him at some point anyway to be able to win. Meanwhile, John Hunter Nemechek was really, really pissed off, was not very happy with Ty Gibbs, and basically was mad, basically saying that's not the way I would have raced for the victory, and basically said that basically did not call that racing. Now, I do want to give a contrary to John Hunter Nemechek. It's kind of funny that this is the guy, and I like John Hunter a lot, don't get me wrong, but John Nemechek about 6 years ago, legitimately, I know a lot of people think it's kind of nuts to bring up something from 6 years ago, but John Hunter literally kind of wrecked Cole Custer. It wasn't intentional, but he wrecked Cole Custer for the win and basically wrecked Cole Custer into the barriers pretty much, and they went side by side across the line. So John Hunter really shouldn't be talking about him. Plus, literally just 2 weeks ago, John Hunter was involved in a situation where he basically blocked his teammate for the win. The driver was going for the championship for the victory, and basically kind of really find it funny, a little bit hypocritical and ironic there. Now, going into the moving situation, I've seen a lot of people that are really, really mad at Ty Gibbs, and in my opinion, I really do not see a problem with what Ty Gibbs did. I know a ton of people are going to disagree with me on this, but hear me out when I say this. This is no, and a lot of people were happy with what Ross Chastain did last week, yet they're really, really mad out here at Ty Gibbs. And to me, I have to disagree with a lot of people, Eric. I think Ty Gibbs did what he had to do on the last lap, and it's the last lap of the race. Yes, I completely understand why people are upset, because again, they feel like that John probably should have won this race. He had a better car most of the day, but Ty got around him and dominated the portion. But at the same time, it's the last lap of the race. And we talk about this too, where Denny Hamlin basically last week's talk about this, and he was really, really frustrated. He kind of felt like, that it's kind of basically his fans basically feel. And I kind of am agreeing with Denny Hamlin here in a sense, because he feels like these younger drivers race more harder and stuff. And he doesn't, again, he kind of goes back to 2017, which that's a much different story. But in my opinion, Ty Gibbs did nothing wrong. It's the last lap. If you like Ross Chastain's move, you should like what Ty Gibbs did. And to me, I don't see anything Ty Gibbs did wrong there. It's the last lap of the race. You're going for a victory. John really has a right to be upset because he got kind of moved out of the way, but at the same token, at the same time, I think that Ty Gibbs is in the rightest situation. I think he did what he had to do to win. And he knows he's got one coming back, so at least he admits and knows. But in my personal opinion, I think that Ty Gibbs didn't really do anything wrong right there. Picked up his third victory, is the one getting the checks into victory. Some of you are complaining on Twitter. It's a lot of complaining on Twitter after the race. So in my opinion, Ty Gibbs is in the right. And now we're going to on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about NASCAR and Formula One. Now, there was an article, a really good article, I believe that was made out by Nate Ryan, and basically there was a lot of discussion on the impact of F1 growth in young American racers. And this is an article that featured 3 drivers, including Kevin Harvick, Ryan Blaney, and Chase Elliott were all in that article. Kevin Harvick said he is trying to steer rising stars Brent Cruz and Connor Sillish and his son Keelan basically away from trying to get over to Formula One. I think because of Formula One's growth right now, I think a lot of younger talent right now is trying to get over to Formula One America. The problem is, and like I mentioned earlier, is there really isn't a lot of rides that are available in Formula One, but it just shows, and even his son Keelan is more interested in Formula One. Keelan, of course, has been racing in go-karts. Keelan seems to be more interested in getting into Formula One than he is into NASCAR, and I think in IndyCar as well. You see a lot of these kids are more interested in going to Formula One, but Kevin Harvick does bring up a good point. That basically definitely does bring up a really, really good point here. That basically, these kids are going to go to Formula 3 and stuff, and then they're absolutely going to struggle. He says it's good to grow for Formula 1, but I think that he's on point there. Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney has some really much better comments and some really, really great comments about F1's growth. Chase Elliott, of course, said he's a big fan of Formula 1, but he said that they basically need to have a shorter format and all that stuff. And Ryan Blaney also kind of shared some very, very similar comments to them. He said, if you're a fan of motorsports, you're going to love this. And I think that's one thing for me. I think that, again, it's very big competition for IndyCar and stuff, but I think if you're a fan of motorsports, I think you love Formula 1. For me, I used to just be an all NASCAR fan, but over the last couple of years, I've changed my tune. I've become a fan of IndyCar over the years. I've become a fan of Formula 1 over the years. I've even become a fan of IMSA over the years. And if you're a fan of motorsports, I think you're going to love it. But Formula 1 has been having a much major and a much more massive growth here in the United States. And I think that's not a bad thing, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's good for competition, too. Because you got a lot of people saying that NASCAR is better than Formula 1. Formula 1 is better than NASCAR in some aspects. IndyCar is better than both sports. IMSA is better than all the sports. I think the competition is a good thing. But for me, personally, myself, I'm a big fan of all motorsports in general. I'm kind of on the same area with Ryan Blaney too. And again, I love the fact that Formula 1 is growing here in the United States. And it's good to see that for sure. I mean, it's not going to probably get to the levels of NASCAR is anytime soon, but it's getting there to that point. Now, I do expect the ratings for the race this weekend to be kind of lower. I don't think even 1 million people are going to watch this weekend because it's a very late night race, but I could end up being wrong. But it's going to be a very late race for Formula 1. But again, I think a lot of NASCAR fans are probably going to watch that Formula 1 race this weekend. So I'm really intrigued to see what happens in regards to the ratings long term. But that's coming up for sure. We've got a Formula 1 race coming up. And I think those comments are definitely really, really interesting, to be honest and sincere with you. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories of today's episode, as we're talking about the Nashville Fairgrounds. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern on Thursday afternoon that Tennessee Governor Bill Lee is proposing $17 million in state funding for Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway and renovations to help lure back NASCAR into the near future. This is really, really huge. The fact that the Texas governor is trying to give $17 million to Nashville Fairgrounds for renovations, I think is really, really good. Now, we've been following this Nashville Fairgrounds story here on this channel for the last about a year or so, and we've really been kind of landlocked in a standstill here for a little bit for the last, so we've basically been neutral for a little bit, really haven't been able to make a ton of moves. And the biggest reason is because this proposal has to get approved by the Fair Board. Now, there's definitely been a lot of support toward the Nashville Fairgrounds from the Nashville people, and there's also been a lot of negativity from the people in the Nashville area. Some complaining about the noise. One female basically saying that there's 4 or 5 active Formula 1 tracks within 30 miles, and a lot of people agreeing through. Some having really good comments about the parking situation, which I totally agree that parking is something that definitely is going to need to be addressed, and some other people with some not smartest comments. But just because we don't agree with them, even if we disagree, and that does not mean that their comments cannot be heard. They have a right to speak their opinions. So that's one thing that needs to be said. You don't send hate or anything toward them. That's just that right there. But another big thing we're waiting on is the Fair Board. With Jason Bergeron dropping, they got someone new coming in, and we're still waiting for that to get approved. Now, like I said, we're locked in a standstill, but there's a lot of things that they are trying to do with the Nashville Fair Board. They're trying to put mufflers in there onto the track, trying to put walls up and stuff to where there's not as much sound coming out the track, and they're also proposing less races in the Nashville Fairgrounds as well. And like I said, there are a lot of things that need to be done to the Nashville Fairgrounds for the track is absolutely going to be 100% operational. They've got to get the grandstands basically renovated. They got to get the track renovated. And with these huge money and huge renovations coming in, I think it's really awesome. And another big thing that I think that's really cool about this is it's another short track. Everybody has been craving for more short tracks, and I think that if this does officially get approved from the Fair Board, which I think it's going to, these renovations are going to come in. Now, the big question long term is how long will it be before a Cup Series race comes back? I think the earliest a Cup Series race could come back is 2024 at the earliest, and that's very lucky 2024. I'm more realistically, though, looking at a 2025 or 2026 to probably be the year that the Nashville Fairgrounds does come back. But again, there's a lot of seats they need to put in. I think they get about 17,000 or 18,000 seats, and there's a lot of talk. They're going to try to put around 40,000 seats or 35,000 seats, or 30,000, excuse me, is kind of the area they're trying to put in, which I think a lot of people are going to not be happy about that. But I think 30,000 for the track is really not that bad. It's going to be high-ticket commodities, and they're going to charge a lot of people probably really, really big. I can tell you there's a lot of things that SMI is doing. I don't agree with everything SMI has done, especially with Atlanta, but I will say some of the things that SMI has been doing, trying to get North Wilkesboro back here, trying to get the Nashville Fairgrounds back up and running, and trying to get some of these short tracks back up here. And again, Nashville can support 2 tracks. They've got the Nashville Super Speedway, and they can support 2 tracks as well. To me, I think Nashville Fairgrounds has a really great and a really awesome opportunity right here. They still do have to get approved by the Fair Board, so it's not officially coming back yet, but I think at Nashville Fairgrounds now has a very strong chance to come back. And again, for a lot of people complaining about the sound and live in the Nashville area, let me make this preface for you. This track has been around for over 100 years. In fact, it's been there since 1904. It's been there for 118 years. And that soccer stadium you guys are proposing, you really don't have a problem with, that is going to cause as much sound as the Nashville Fairgrounds. So to me, I think a lot of people complain about the sound. I don't entirely agree with, and you shouldn't have moved near a racetrack if you didn't want to hear the sound. But still, we have to hear what those people say. That being said, though, I do hope it gets approved. I think there's a chance. I think it's going to get approved. Again, the board last time you remember was 3-1 majority, and we're probably going to get it approved. It's a 30-year deal minimum. I think it's still up till 2050. So the deal gets approved. I think it's going to be great for the track, and I think the future Nashville Fairgrounds is very, very promising. I know some people that have been out there very, very recently, and it's good to see the Nashville Fairgrounds has a shot at coming back. I think the track deserves it. Nashville is a growing market and a growing area, and expanding into the Nashville area, I think is very, very important for the long term and getting that Nashville Fairgrounds back, since they have not hosted a Cup Series race since 2000. Not a Cup race, a race since 2000, a Cup race in nearly 40 years. I think it's very possible in the near future that Nashville Fairgrounds could have a Cup race. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we are talking about junior motorsports. Now, Dustin Long wrote a really good article about Friday 5. He does this every single week. And he talked to Kelly Earnhardt Miller about junior motorsports' future in the Cup Series. We've talked about junior motorsports joining the Cup Series here on the channel many times. And there's been a lot. It's been really quiet here for the last year or so on the Junior Motorsports Cup, and it's been kind of weird if we know, because the last time we heard, I think, was back in June or July. They said that they were maybe looking to jump in 2023, but they're going to need a charter. Now, she was speaking to Dustin Long, and she says the window is not closed for Junior Motorsports to jump up to the Cup Series, but the timing would need to be right for them to jump up to the Cup Series. So it's not on the realm of possibility that Junior Motorsports could jump up the Cup here in the next couple years. The biggest thing right now, though, that unfortunately is holding Junior Motorsports' plans back to jump up to the Cup Series right now is the charters. The charter is the #1 key thing right now that's holding them back from jumping up to the Cup Series right now. And there's a lot of teams that have charters currently at the moment. Now, we've heard rumors back about a year ago that JTG was planning maybe to sell, but their charter stuff, maybe sell their team. But again, they're looking like they're going to come back in 2023. They downsize a one-car operation. And I do think there's other organizations that are trying to get charters at the moment here for 2023. Yes, we just started 2022 not too long ago. But you look at Junior Motorsports. The big thing for me is I think Junior Motorsports wants to come out to Cup. I made a video on this about a long time ago, right before the season started, that I really want to see Junior Motorsports make that jump up the Cup. I think a lot of people really do as well. It's Dale Jr., and it's Dale Jr.'s organization. And I know a lot of people also bring up the fact that Hendrick, he would have to drop the Hendrick tag, which I think he easily would be able to do that. And they still get that support for Hendrick, because remember, Rick Hendrick is part of the ownership group, and that's one thing that would have to change as well, is ownership dropping from Hendrick Motorsports, which they can easily do that and drop the ownership group. It's not a major problem right there. But I think Junior Motorsports jumping up to the Cup Series would be really huge. Now, a big question is, how competitive would they be? It depends on a couple things. One, they have to get major support for Hendrick Motorsports, which they'd be able to do, but also how fast are they going to be? Now, another big question too is, what drivers would they be looking at to potentially make that jump up to the Cup Series? Well, you've got all the drivers currently at Junior Motorsports right now. Of course, there's 4 drivers driving full-time at the moment. You've got Josh Berry, who's driving the 8, who's, of course, won races for the team in the Xfinity Series last year and still looking for his first win of the year. You've got Noah Gragson, who I think one of the biggest reasons they've kept in Junior Motorsports for the last 4 years is because of the fact I think long-term they really want to jump him up to the Cup Series. I think you're trying to potentially get a ride up there. I know there's talk maybe Colleague could have an opportunity to make that jump, but I really do believe that Junior Motorsports, they really want to make that jump up there. You also have, of course, Justin Allgaier, who has made starts in the Cup Series, which made those starts back in 2015 and 2014 for H. Scott Motorsports, who had association with Hendrick, and then he jumped over to Junior Motorsports. And then, of course, you have the young hotshot Sam Mayer. You do have other drivers, though, that they could go. Of course, Miguel Paludo is an older driver who could have an opportunity to run the organization if they jump up the Cup. You've got other prospects like Carson Quaffle, of course, who drives for their organization in the late model programs, and other up-and-coming stars in the ranks. Now, of course, Junior Motorsports, like I said, is not very, at this point, likely they're going to jump up in 2023, but it is good to see that they're still interested in jumping up to the Cup Series. I think Junior Motorsports jumping up the Cup Series absolutely needs to happen, and you never know, maybe Dale Jr. runs a one-off start for them in the Cup Series. I know a lot of people want to see Dale Jr. come back and at least do a one-off. I know he's ruled out the possibility of doing super speedways long-term, but I don't know if that means he's ruled out the possibility of doing other races in the Cup Series. So to me, I really hope it happens that Junior Motorsports does jump up to the Cup Series. I think it's very possible it could happen, but we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to the future of this team. So anyway, that's today's long NASCAR and Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on page as well. Let's get jump over that and comment below your thoughts on today's video. Do you still think that Junior Motorsports is going to jump up to the Cup Series or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about the future of Nashville Fairgrounds? And do you think there will be a Cup Series race in the near future? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we're most likely going to have picks for the Martinsville weekend. That'll most likely be up on the channel. Then a news video most likely Wednesday. Then you'll have a race preview for the Truck Series race on Thursday. Then we've got a lot of our content dropping on the channel through the rest of the week that I think a lot of you are going to be really excited about. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. And I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.